This is my kitchen table and also my filing system. Over much of the past 3 decades, I've been an investor. The highest calling of mankind, I've often thought, was private equity. And then I started interviewing.
While I watch your interviews, I know how to do some interviewing.
I've learned in doing my interviews how leaders make it to the top.
I asked him how much he wanted. He said $250. I said fine. I didn't negotiate with him. I did no due diligence.
I have something I'd like to sell, and how they stay there. You don't feel inadequate now because being only the second wealthiest man in the world, is that right? One of the greatest growth businesses in the world is consulting. It seems that everybody today is either using a consultant or is a consultant. The largest consulting firm in the world is Accenture, with more than 569,000 employees and a market cap of over $200 billion. Julie Sweet has grown it dramatically in the several years that she's been the CEO. I had a conversation with her about why everybody uses consultants and why everybody should be a consultant. So it seems as if everybody's a consultant these days. When people are being raised, they don't say to the little child, I hope you grow up to be a consultant. Why does everybody want to be a consultant, and what are all these consultants doing?
Well, David, I think that we actually defy the label consultant, because sometimes consultant seems to imply that we only give advice. And when you look at what Accenture does, we're really different than the traditional version of a consultant. Our clients look to us for 2 things: relevance, how to help them be relevant today and tomorrow, like a Jaguar or Land Rover who hired us to help them radically transform the marketing of their vehicles and the experience of their owners. And then the other thing they look for is results, right? So not just advice, but actually how do things change and how do you execute? Like someone who hires us for supply chain, where we help digitize it and change their inventory results and their inventory turnaround. So we don't simply consult in a traditional sense. We're really about relevance and results, and that's what is driving our business.
So let's suppose I'm a large corporation and I have a problem, and typically in today when you have a problem, what you do is you call a consultant. And so they call you up and say, would you consult with me, which is to help solve my problem. Do you then put in a team of people?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important things is we always start with what's actually either the problem or the opportunity. And we're very focused on repeatable solutions that get customized by the client, but not trying to be bespoke. Sort of the old consulting is, let me come in, let me bring a bunch of people and study it. But today, you can start with data. We serve, 75% of the top 500 of Fortune 500. And so what we're bringing to our clients often are solutions that then get customized, that are based on experience. And we invest a lot. We'll spend $4 billion this year in acquisitions. We'll spend about $800 million in R&D. We have over 7,000 patents, or patents pending. So all of these things are assets to help our clients achieve their goals faster with higher quality than they can do on their own. And that's really the test. And sometimes, by the way, we say to clients, don't hire us because either their business case isn't ambitious enough or they don't need us.
Well, what about a consulting project? In my example, I'm the CEO, I have a problem, I call you up, I say, solve my problem or give me a solution. How long does it usually take? Does it take 6 months to come up with a solution, a year? Or does it say it's going to take a forever solution, it's going to be 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think one of the most important things that's come out of COVID is the need to move very quickly. I had a lot of clients post-COVID who'd say, we move so fast. I want to keep going. And I'd always ask a simple question, David. I'd say, well, what have you changed? And oftentimes, they haven't changed. And we don't operate as big companies permanently in crisis mode. And so when you think about how long does it solve things, a lot of it starts with, the company being willing to set aggressive goals. Right? And so we're doing work, for example, with a large consumer goods company where we said we're going to, in 12 weeks, have a pilot to actually improve their manufacturing. And that pre-COVID probably would have been a 6-month project, not because of Accenture, but because of how the client worked. And so what we are trying to do now is work with our clients to work differently and to work faster.
So how do you charge? Do you charge by the hour? Do you charge by the project? Is it a cost plus profit thing? What's the secret of your billing?
So our preference is to either have a fixed fee or to have something that shares, upside or downside. And the reason for that is that we don't view ourselves as a vendor or a consultant in that we are keeping ourselves at arm's length. We believe that the best way to get success is to co-create solutions, have integrated teams. The advice I often will give CEOs is that our team at Accenture and the client's team should have the exact same performance objectives so that they're completely aligned. Now, not every client is willing to work that way, but we think it's really important. And so we have plenty of clients who want to bill by the hour, and that's their choice, but that's not our preference.
Okay, let's suppose somebody hires your firm and they have a one-year consulting project, and at the end they say, I don't like this consulting advice, I'm not going to follow it. In fact, I'm not going to pay your bill. Does that ever happen?
Well, look, we're not perfect, so it may happen, but shame on us if it takes a year to figure out that our client doesn't like what we do. I mean, one of the things that we focus on a lot is working with the client day in and day out, side by side, and not throwing things over a wall to consultants. So unlikely that that specific scenario would happen.
So without violating confidences, can you give me an example of something where you advise somebody, it turned out to be great for them, and they're so happy they're willing to brag about what the great job you did?
Well, we've got lots of examples of that. So if you take, for example, what we're doing with Shiseido. And we've announced a partnership there, and we're helping Shiseido. We talked about compressed transformation. We're helping them digitize the experience of the end consumer. We're helping them redo their inventory and their systems. And so this is something that we're both very proud of, the work that we're doing together.
Let's suppose you need a consultant. Who do you call? Do you call McKinsey or do you call one of your own people?
So normally we call one of our own people, but I will give you a great example. When I became CEO, I needed to put in a new operating model, and I wanted to do it faster than any we'd ever done in our past and any client had done to prove that you can move at scale. So 6 months, biggest change in our history. At the time, our practice was completely sold out to do change management and new org design. And the head of my practice said, I think you should hire this small company called Cates Kessler. And I would tell you, my leaders were like, why are we hiring a different consultant? Within 2 weeks, the same leaders all came back and said, we need Cates Kessler to be part of Accenture, and they are today. So I'm grateful that they took the call, because I'm sure it was a little intimidating to have Accenture hire someone. But the lesson for that is, to have humility. And one of the things that I think is really important that, when we look at leaders in industry around digitization, it's those who are willing to not always build it themselves, who think they have all of the answers, but that actually look outside. And Accenture did the same.
Did you have any mistakes you've made or failures that you can talk about so that people could feel you're not just a superhuman?
People ask that question as if the only challenge is at work. Challenges come in a lot of different packages.
Let's talk about how you rose up to be the CEO. So you grew up where?
I grew up in Tustin, California, which has a little sign, and it says, work where you must, but live and shop in Tustin. So Southern California.
I thought it would have a sign that say home of Julie Sweet. Doesn't have that sign yet?
We're going to have to work on that.
So were you a star student in high school or a star athlete or something like that?
I was a speech and debate star. So starting when I was a freshman, I used to do two kinds of things. My dad used to get in his little VW, and I would do the circuit, the Lions Club, Optimist Club, and I'm greatly appreciative of all of those clubs because they helped me earn money for college. And then I was on the speech and debate team, and really loved that. And my parents didn't love it so much at times because I was apparently, used the skills against them, but it was definitely a great way of creating a skill that I use today.
In other words, if you're a debate champion, you can debate your parents.
Yes.
They didn't like that. Okay. So where did you go to college?
I went to Claremont McKenna College in Southern California, and then I went to Columbia Law School.
So did your parents say you should be a lawyer, or you went to become a lawyer because you were good at talking and debating and so forth? Is that why you went to law school?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a lawyer since I was in 8th grade. And I remember my senior year in college, before I wrote, and accepted going to Columbia, one of my professors said, "Have you ever met a lawyer?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I am not letting you sign away." I was borrowing all the money to go to college, to go to law school, until you've met a lawyer. And I met a lawyer, and I said, "Great, I still want to go to law school." And I went to law school.
So you went across the country. I don't know why you went to Columbia. Because you like places that begin with a C, or what is it? What prompted you to go from Claremont to Columbia?
It's funny. I look back and I'm not sure why I had this at the time. Maybe it's because I'd gone to China during college. But I said, I've grown up in Southern California. I should experience the East Coast. I fully intended to go back to Southern California, but I fell in love with New York. And so it was actually a deliberate decision that I needed to diversify my experience.
After you graduated from Columbia, you went to work at Cravath, Swaine & Moore, which is a large firm in New York that I was a summer associate at. Continuing the C, it began with a C. But why did you pick Cravath? It wasn't a place that a lot of women had become partners at.
It wasn't. In fact, at the time, I remember when I came back and I had accepted my offer, all my women friends were saying, "What have you done?" And all my male friends were like, "Congratulations." So it was definitely not at the time, selection of choice. It's now run by a woman, by the way. And I picked it because I had no intention of staying a lawyer. It was the best in the world, and I wanted to go there for 2 years and then go off and make my career, at the time, I thought, in Asia.
Okay, so you ultimately became a partner, I think the third woman partner?
I was the third woman corporate partner, the ninth woman partner in the history of the firm.
Okay, so you're a corporate partner at Cravath, which is a well-compensated law firm, let's say, and you're making a fair amount of money by any standard. Why did you decide to leave and give up that partnership? And were the people at Cravath, who usually don't have people leaving, were they shocked?
I think they were surprised, but I was leaving for a great role, so they were very supportive. I still remember being at my desk and picking up the phone when a recruiter called me about the Accenture job. And it was a few months after my father had passed away at a very young age, at 68. And I think looking back, that's why I took a meeting. And I basically said, I'm 42 years old and I can see my future, and it would be a great future. I loved Cravath. And Accenture offered me something different, and I decided to take it, and I think it was the last gift of my dad, to be honest.
So did you think when you joined the company that a female would become the head of this gigantic organization, or did you think that it was going to be typically a male-run kind of thing?
I didn't really think about it because I joined as general counsel, and as the general counsel, and coming in where the average tenure on the leadership team when I joined was 30 years, I didn't come in with the expectation that I would be CEO. Really, when we think about how do you make a change in leadership and how do you continue to foster diversity in your leadership, our former CEO, Pierre Nanterme, was a great example of someone who sponsored me, saw potential, and created a new pathway that I certainly didn't have an expectation when I came into Accenture.
You're one of the largest private employers in the United States, is that right?
That's right, and that's globally, of course. And last year, we actually are really proud that we added a net 100,000 jobs around the globe.
Second, during the period of COVID, you added that many jobs. I mean, why was business so good during the COVID period?
It's really interesting when you think about what happened in COVID. Sort of overnight, there was we all moved online. And Accenture, since 2013, has been building our capabilities in digital cloud and security. And so at the time of COVID, right, we became relevant and critical for really all of the world's leading companies. And when you look at this fiscal year, which we just ended, we actually had more clients who had over $100 million in bookings in the first 3 quarters of our fiscal year than all of last year, driven by what we call compressed transformation, the need to digitize all parts of the business.
Now, one of your competitors, and you may not admit you have competitors, but a company called McKinsey, you probably have heard of them, they say, we don't want to be a publicly traded company. We're a partnership. It's easier to do this when you're not a publicly traded company. But you're a publicly traded company with a market cap of over $200 billion. So what do you think about the view that consultants should be privately owned as opposed to publicly traded?
You know, I think it's an interesting question. For us, the markets are an important element of discipline, right? We're giving our results every quarter. And of course, we think it really attracts talent. Our employee value proposition is a really strong one because of our stock, which is a huge part. We have a pay for performance and a culture that's tied to creating value for all our stockholders. And so it's served us well in terms of attracting great talent.
All right, but you're not competing with private equity, I hope. I mean, you're not going to be trying to steal people from private equity to go into consulting, I hope.
No, although private equity seems to be trying to compete with professional services and hiring a few people and acquiring a lot in professional services these days. So.
Well, that business has been a growth business. That's why you see a lot of acquisitions there. Now, you're doing this from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a great place. It's the capital of our country, but it's not necessarily known as a place you run global businesses from. Why are you headquartered in Washington, D.C.?
We have not had a headquarters really since for 30 years, 3 decades at least. Pre-COVID, we were probably the largest organization running itself remotely. Our leaders are around the world, and so the sort of de facto headquarters has always been wherever the CEO is. So the last CEO was in Paris, it was in Paris. Before that, it was Boston, before that, Dallas. And so DC is a great place to be based. And in fact, this is the first time in 30 years the CEO and the CFO are out of the same office. And so I'm very fortunate to have Casey McClure here with me in DC.
So during the COVID period of time, did you go into the office or you just worked remotely?
I worked remotely. One of the things that we are famous for is being very close to our clients. And so our offices are not the center of our work. And because we have a distributed leadership team, I literally, even pre-COVID, would go to the office and be on, Teams calls. And so during COVID, I wanted to make sure that our people felt comfortable working from home and didn't feel pressure to go into the office.
So how do you meet your clients? You don't go meet them yourself so much because you've got other people around the world. And during the COVID period of time, I assume you really didn't go meet anybody. You were just traveling and from your office to your home, if that.
Right. So pre-COVID, I did definitely travel a lot. And I think we've all learned, however, during COVID, that connections can be built remotely. And certainly, my fun fact was I became CEO September 1st, 2019, and literally 6 months and 11 days after becoming CEO, COVID, the pandemic was declared. And so I've had a very interesting first couple of years, and I've built really strong relationships by leveraging technology and really thinking about how do you build connections. And I think one of the great learnings out of COVID is this idea of omni-connections. And I think too many people focus on remote work and hybrid work and a physical location as opposed to how do you connect with people? When do you need to do it physically? How to be intentional, and what's required for connections.
So how do you keep up with what's going on around the world? I mean, you have so many consultants, and do you know all the big projects? Do you get reports daily or weekly or monthly about what's going on, or if there are problems? And do you have to go out and woo the clients yourself and get the business?
Well, first and foremost, I lead by example, and our business is about clients. And so every quarter, I publish for all of my managing directors how many client meetings I've had and how many meetings I've had with our ecosystem partners to reinforce that our business begins with understanding our clients. I call it the proximity imperative. And so I spend more than 50% of my time with clients, not just wooing them, not in a sales mode, but understanding them, building relationships. And that's really what our entire foundation of Accenture is built on, is that proximity to clients. And then with respect to how do I run the business, one of the most important lessons that I think any leader has is you build a great team and then you rely on them for what they are, have been asked to do. And so I don't micromanage. I really focus on, who is doing what and what do I need to know, and having a great team.
Let's suppose I go to business school and I do reasonably well there, and I say I want to be a consultant, and you interview me or somebody interviews me. What are the skills you're looking for? Is it hard work, integrity, brilliance? What makes a good consultant?
All of those are, I think, table stakes, but one of the things that we really look for, so yes, we want people who work hard, who have performed well, but the most important skill that we see is the willingness to learn. Because the environment around us is changing. We know from a skills perspective, skills in 2017, 30% of them are obsolete today. And so we test for learning. We ask really basic questions like, what have you learned in the last 6 months that wasn't in a classroom? And so learning, agility, curiosity are really core to our hiring philosophy.
So what do you do when you're not consulting? Do you have any outside interests?
Well, I took up tennis during COVID, which was pretty brave at 52, and I actually can hit the ball. I'm not great, but I can, play a game. And mostly I focus on my two daughters, who are 13 and about to be 15.
Have you thought of hiring a consultant for your tennis game? If you hire a consultant, that would improve your tennis game, right?
Well, actually, most of the time I play tennis with a coach because that way I can actually hit the ball and get a little bit better.
Okay. So if the President of the United States called you and said, you're running a gigantic company, you've done a terrific job, I need some more women leaders in my government, why don't you come in and be secretary of something important? What would you say?
I'd say I'm honored to be asked, but I have really important work to do in the private sector.
Okay, so you wouldn't go in right now?
That is not my current aspiration.
Okay, now somebody who's watching this would say this person has an incredible professional life, rose up to be a partner at Cravath, now she's the CEO of this gigantic company. Can you cite something that didn't work out in your professional life so that people could feel you're not just a superhuman, and to make people feel good that they can see that somebody made a mistake? Did you have any mistakes you've made or failures that you can talk about?
David, people ask that question as if the only challenge is at work. And for me, work has been a great place. I've had a lot of success, and I don't have a spectacular failure. But in my own personal life, right, my father died when he was 68. I had breast cancer. We had drug addiction in our family, mental health issues. And so one of the things I've learned is that challenges come in a lot of different packages. And to have empathy for people, when someone having a bad day, you don't know if that bad day is because they've got something going on at home or in their personal life. And so my challenges haven't been about spectacular failures at work, but they have been challenges. And I talk about that because I think that's true for a lot of people.